when change goes wrong. In my line of work, timing is everything. Make the wrong move at the wrong time and you don't get a second chance. The same rule applies to business. Today, I want to share something that might surprise you. Some of the biggest retail chains in America didn't fail because they did nothing. They failed because they tried to change everything all at once. I'm talking about brands you grew up with, stores your parents shopped at, companies that seemed too big to fail, but they made one critical mistake. They tried to reinvent themselves without understanding who they really were. They looked at what was working for other companies and thought they could just copy it. They didn't test. They didn't listen to their customers. They just went all in on a vision that looked good on paper but crashed in reality. This isn't about making fun of failures. This is about understanding what happens when you abandon the people who made you successful in the first place. Because every single one of these chains had loyal customers. They had market share. They had brand recognition. And they threw it all away trying to be something they weren't. Let's look at 7 chains that tried to reinvent themselves and failed spectacularly. Section 2, the stakes. Why this matters. Here's what most people don't realize. According to Coresight research, retail store closures hit approximately 15,000 in 2025, while only about 5,800 new stores opened. That's a net loss of over 9,000 stores in a single year. These aren't just numbers. These are jobs, communities, and brands that have been part of American life for decades. The retail apocalypse isn't just about Amazon taking over. It's about companies making bad decisions at critical moments. Wikipedia's list of retailers affected by the retail crisis shows hundreds of chains that have closed, filed for bankruptcy, or drastically reduced their footprint. Since 2020, some of them are names you know well. A&P, once America's largest retailer with 15,709 stores at its peak, closed completely in 2015 after 156 years in business. Bed Bath & Beyond, a household name, filed for bankruptcy in April 2023 and liquidated all of its stores. Party City closed all 700 corporate-owned locations in early 2025. But here's the key point. Many of these failures weren't inevitable. They weren't just victims of changing markets. They actively made choices that destroyed their own businesses. They tried to rebrand. They changed their logos. They eliminated what made them special. They assumed their customers would just follow along. The customers didn't. And when a retail chain loses its customer base, it loses everything. The stakes are understanding what actually kills a business, so you don't make the same mistakes in your own life or career. Section 3, Chain 1, JCPenney's Disastrous Makeover. Let's start with one of the most famous rebranding disasters in retail history, JCPenney. This company was founded in 1902 by James Cash Penney. For over 100 years, it was a staple of American shopping. Middle-class families went there for affordable clothes, home, goods, and reliable quality. By 2011, the company was struggling, but it still had a strong customer base and brand recognition. That's when the board decided to hire Ron Johnson as CEO. Johnson wasn't just anyone. He was the guy who made Apple stores successful. He helped create the Genius Bar concept. Before that, he was vice president of merchandising at Target and helped make them cool with the cheap chic strategy. On paper, he was the perfect person to save JCPenney. The board gave him a $52.7 million compensation package when he joined. The stock jumped 24%. When he announced his vision in January 2012, here's what Johnson did. He decided to completely transform JCPenney. He eliminated sales and coupons, which JCPenney shoppers loved, and replaced them with everyday low prices under a fair and square pricing strategy. He changed the logo from the classic design that 84% of consumers recognized to a modern one that only 56% could identify with the brand. He redesigned store layouts to create boutique experiences. He brought in exclusive brands and partnerships. He essentially tried to turn JCPenney into something closer to Target or an Apple store. The problem was simple. JCPenney's customers didn't want that. According to Time magazine, Johnson walked away from the old audience and assumed that a new one would appear, instantly from out of the blue, but that new audience never showed up. The old customers felt alienated. They loved coupons. They enjoyed the hunt for a good deal. CNN Business reported that in the fourth quarter of 2012, same-store sales dropped 32%, which some called the worst quarter in retail history. Johnson's approach showed what marketing professors at Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business called a fundamental misunderstanding of the market. JCPenney operated in a price-sensitive, promotion-heavy environment. Their customers were budget-conscious and willing to go to competitors for better deals. Taking away the promotions didn't just change the shopping experience. It actually made things more expensive for customers because the everyday low prices weren't low enough to offset the lost discounts. The board fired Johnson in April 2013, just 17 months after hiring him. The damage was done. JCPenney never fully recovered. They brought back the old CEO, Mike Ullman, who said in 2015, "We are still trying to fully recover from the self-inflicted wounds of the previous strategy." The company has been struggling ever since, closing hundreds of stores and posting losses, year after year, all because they tried to be something they weren't. Section 4, Chain 2, Gap's logo fiasco and identity. Crisis. Gap is another American brand that made serious mistakes trying to reinvent itself. The company opened its first store in San Francisco in 1969. By 2000, there were over 2,000 Gap stores in the U.S. and more than 500 international locations. Gap sweatshirts and jeans were everywhere. The brand was a mall staple. But by the late 2000s, Gap was facing serious competition from fast fashion brands like H&M and big box retailers like Walmart. The company decided it needed to modernize. In October 2010, Gap unveiled a completely new logo. They ditched their iconic blue box logo that had represented the brand for years and replaced it with a generic-looking design that featured Gap in a different font with a small blue square in the corner. The response was immediate and brutal. Customers hated it. People flooded social media with complaints. They said the new logo looked like something a tech startup would use, not a clothing retailer. It had no personality. It didn't represent what Gap stood for. According to reports, only 56% of consumers could identify the new logo with the Gap brand, compared to 84% who recognized the original. Gap reversed course within 1 week. That's how bad the backlash was. They brought back the old logo and essentially admitted the whole thing was a mistake. But the damage to their reputation was done. It became a case study in what not to do when rebranding, as the street. Reported in 2025, Gap has now closed over 2,000 locations. The company went from more than 2,500 Gap-branded stores at its peak to just a fraction of that today. The bigger problem was that the logo change was just a symptom of Gap's identity crisis. They didn't know who they were anymore. They were trying to appeal to younger demographics, but they abandoned what made them special to their core customers. Traffic data from Placer.ai showed that Gap store visits actually rose slightly in early 2025, but then declined again, dropping 5.4% in June and 5.1% in July. The brand is surviving mainly because of Old Navy and Athleta, their other chains, not because of Gap itself. Section 5, Chain 3, Sears failed prototype stores. Sears is one of the saddest stories in retail. This company was once the largest retailer in America. They sold everything. People ordered entire houses from Sears catalogs. They were part of American culture for over a century. But by the 2000s, Sears was struggling badly. Walmart and other big box stores had taken their market share. Online shopping was eating into their sales. The company was drowning in debt. Even as Sears was going through bankruptcy proceedings, they tried one last attempt at reinvention. They rolled out prototype stores with bold new color palettes and completely different layouts. The idea was to make Sears feel modern and fresh. According to research on failed retail rebrands, the problem was that Sears had no money to actually support a wider rollout. They created these prototype stores, but they couldn't afford to transform the rest of the chain. The rebranding effort was quietly abandoned. It made no real impact because it was too little, too late. Sears and Kmart merged in 2005, and the combined company declared bankruptcy in 2018. Today, Sears barely exists. The stores that made generations of Americans think of. Quality and reliability are mostly gone. The brand is essentially dead. The rebranding attempt didn't save them because it was just window dressing on a fundamentally broken business model. Section 6. Chain 4. Kmart's Lime Green Makeover. Kmart followed a similar path to Sears, which makes sense since they eventually merged. Kmart was once a major discount retailer with hundreds of locations across the country. But like Sears, they struggled to compete with Walmart and Target. After filing for bankruptcy, Kmart decided they needed to refresh their image. They introduced a lime green makeover. The idea was to make the stores feel more modern and appealing. New signage, new colors, a whole new aesthetic. The problem, just like with Sears, was funding. As documented in reports on failed rebrands, Kmart didn't have the money to support a broader rollout of the concept. Only a handful of stores got the makeover. The rest remained the same old Kmart that customers were already avoiding. The concept made no impact and was eventually scrapped. Kmart continued closing stores by the hundreds. The brand that once had a strong presence in American shopping is now almost completely gone. The lime green makeover was just another example of trying to fix a deep problem with a surface-level solution. Section 7. Chain 5. Radio Shack's identity confusion. Radio Shack was the go-to place for electronics, parts, and tech help for decades. If you needed a weird cable or a specific component, Radio Shack had it. They employed knowledgeable staff who could actually help you with technical questions. But as technology changed and big box stores like Best Buy and online retailers like Amazon took over, Radio Shack started losing its identity. The company went through several attempts to reinvent itself. They tried to become more like Best Buy, selling mainstream consumer electronics instead of focusing on their niche. They rebranded their stores multiple times with different looks and concepts. They even tried to rebrand themselves as The Shack at one point, which was widely mocked. Nothing worked, because they abandoned what made them special in the first place. Radio Shack filed for bankruptcy in 2015, closed most of its stores, and the brand was sold off. Few attempts to bring it back in different forms have all failed. The company that was once in nearly every mall and shopping center in America is essentially gone. They lost their core. Customers by trying to be everything to everyone, and in the process became nothing to anyone. Section 8, Chain 6. Bed Bath & Beyond's missed opportunities. Bed Bath & Beyond was hugely successful for years. Those 20% off coupons became famous. People would stack them and get amazing deals on home goods, kitchen items, bedding, and bath products. The stores were packed with merchandise, and customers loved browsing the aisles. But the company made several critical mistakes. They were slow to build a strong online presence while competitors like Amazon dominated. They tried to expand with the acquisition of Bye Bye Baby, but that didn't save them. According to Wikipedia's list of retail bankruptcies, when Bed Bath & Beyond's lifeline from Hudson, Bay Capital Management failed, and a $300 million stock offering never materialized. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in April 2023. All remaining stores were shut down. Liquidation sales started on April 26, 2023. The brand's assets were purchased by Overstock.com, which attempted to rebrand its online operations under the Bed Bath & Beyond name, but the physical stores are gone. An attempt to relaunch 11 Bye Bye Baby stores failed by October 2024. The brand that millions of Americans relied on for home goods is now just an online memory. The failure wasn't really about a specific rebranding attempt. It was about not adapting fast enough to changing retail. They stuck with their old model too long, and when they finally tried to change, it was too late. Section 9. Chain 7. Toys R Us and the failed comeback. Toys R Us is a story that hit a lot of people emotionally. This was where kids went to experience magic. The stores were huge. They had every toy you could imagine. Jeffrey the Giraffe was a beloved mascot. For decades, Toys R Us owned the toy retail market. But the company was bought by private equity firms in 2005 in a leveraged buyout that loaded them with $5 billion in debt. That debt made it impossible to invest in improving stores or competing effectively with Walmart, Target, and Amazon. Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy in 2017. and closed all U.S. stores in 2018. There have been multiple attempts to bring Toys R Us back. Small format stores, pop-up shops, shop-in-shop concepts inside other retailers. But none of them have recreated what made Toys R Us special. The attempts to reinvent the brand as something smaller and different haven't worked because what people loved was the full experience of a massive toy store. You can't rebrand that into a corner of a Macy's and expect the magic to still be there. Section 10, putting it all together, the lessons. So what do all these failures teach us? First, understand who your core customers are before you try to change. Every single one of these chains had loyal customers who loved them for specific reasons. JCPenney shoppers loved coupons and deals. Gap customers loved the classic American style. Radio Shack customers valued expertise and niche products. When these companies abandoned what their customers loved, they lost everything. Second, test your changes before you roll them out everywhere. Ron Johnson at JCPenney made massive changes across the entire company without testing them in a few stores first. If he had tested the fair and square pricing in 10 or 20 stores, he would have seen immediately that it wasn't working. Instead, he gambled the entire company on an untested theory. Third, you can't fake authenticity. Gap couldn't just slap on a new logo and suddenly be modern. Sears couldn't paint their stores different colors and suddenly be relevant. Your brand is built over years or decades through actual customer relationships and delivering what you promise. You can't shortcut that with a makeover. Fourth, financial reality matters. Both Sears and Kmart tried to rebrand while drowning in debt, with no money to actually execute the vision. If you don't have the resources to follow through, don't start. A half-done rebrand is worse than no rebrand at all. Fifth, listen to your customers. When Gap changed their logo and customers immediately hated it, at least they listened and changed it back. JCPenney, on the other hand, pushed forward with changes even as sales collapsed. Ron Johnson even said customers needed to be educated about the new pricing and compared coupons to drugs that customers needed to be weaned off. That's not listening, that's arrogance. According to Deborah Weinswig, CEO of Coresight Research, retailers that were unable to adapt supply chains and implement technology to cut costs were significantly impacted, and we continue to see a trend of consumers opting for the path of least resistance. Not only do they want the best prices, but they also have no patience for stores that are constantly disorganized, out of stock, and that deliver poor customer service. The retail landscape is brutal right now. Companies need to adapt to survive. But adaptation doesn't mean abandoning everything that made you successful. It means evolving while staying true to your core identity. The chains that are surviving, like Kohl's and Nordstrom, have reinvented themselves gradually while maintaining what their customers value. The ones that failed tried to become completely different companies overnight. In my world, you survive by understanding the terrain you're operating in. These retail chains failed because they misunderstood their terrain. They thought the problem was their image, when the real problem was their execution. They thought they could copy what worked for other companies without understanding why it worked. They thought their customers would follow them anywhere when customers are actually pretty clear about what they want. The lesson isn't that change is bad. Change is necessary. The lesson is that change has to be strategic, tested, funded, and authentic. It has to respect the people who made you successful while adapting to new realities. Every single one of these 7 chains could have survived if they had understood that basic principle. Instead, they're cautionary tales about what happens when you forget who you are